Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar Leadership Skills Toolkit, Tips, Techniques, and Resources for Library and Information Professionals. My name is Kimberly Brown Harden, and I'm the Northwest Regional Coordinator from the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I'll be the host and question moderator today. Our presenters are Dr. Cheryl Stenstrom and Dr. Sue Alman from San Jose State University School of Information. Cheryl Stenstrom has worked in the library sector since 1993. She is an internationally recognized expert on public libraries and has developed a deep understanding of their organizational structures, governance, and cultures through a combination of experience and research. Her research interests include social influence and decision-making, particularly as they affect libraries. She also continues to actively consult with libraries in Canada and the U.S. on management and governance issues. In addition to holding an MLIS from UBC, she is a graduate of the San Jose Gateway PhD program. She is currently a full-time lecturer in the School of Information at San Jose State University. Dr. Sue Alman has taught library and information science at the University of Michigan, University of Pittsburgh, and San Jose State University, and has held posts in academic libraries. Her areas of specialization include foresight and strategic planning, interpersonal communication, marketing and public relations, and group dynamics. Residing in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Sue teaches, writes, consults, and is currently involved on an IMLS-funded investigation of the possible uses of blockchain technology in libraries and information organization. I'd like to start off the webinar with a few announcements. To register for other webinars or other trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please see the Indiana State Library's events calendar, which can be found on our website at www.in.gov/library. For a full list of our current in-person training menu, please see our continuing education website. The Indiana State Library has many ways we try to stay connected to library staff across the state. For weekly updates on upcoming trainings and to learn more about what's happening in libraries across the state, please subscribe to our weekly e-newsletter, The Wednesday Word. We also offer a blog which provides information about the Indiana State Collection, interview spotlights on library staff from across the state, and information about upcoming events at the Indiana State Library. If you have a question, just type it into the chat box on the upper left side of the screen. I'll be watching and will get your question to Cheryl or Sue as soon as there's a good opportunity. There should also be time near the end for questions. The session is about an hour, so you'll get one LEU for today. After the presentation has ended, please stay logged in to receive your LEU. I'll also be posting a link to a survey about the presentation. Please fill the survey out to let us know how we're doing. Again, please stay logged in at the end of the presentation to access your LEU and the survey link. If you are watching an archived recording of this webinar, instructions on how to obtain your LEU are in the video's description. If at any point during the webinar you experience any sound issues, please see the sound issues box just below the chat box on the left side of the screen. If there is a global sound issue, we will announce it in the chat box. If you are unable to resolve the sound issues you are experiencing, we are recording the meeting and you can watch it online after the meeting has ended. Again, if there is a global sound issue, we will make an announcement in the chat box. Now, without further ado, I will now turn the mic over to Sue and Cheryl.
Thank you, Kim. This is Cheryl Stenstrom speaking. Please, if anyone is having trouble, I know we did some tests. I think I'm coming through loud and clear, but if you are, please let us know in the chat box and we'll try to get you through to there. I do want to just spend a brief minute thanking Kim very much for inviting us here today, and Lisa, who's the person who's been helping us out with the technical issues. And also just before I get started on where Sue and I will be taking this webinar today, note that I'm watching where you're all coming from in the chat there, and interesting to see so many public librarians. I'll add that that is very much my background. I've either worked in public libraries or supporting public libraries for a good part of my career before going into academia. And also just a quick note that I can see you're from all over the US and give you a quick pointer about how we work at San Jose State University. So I'm coming to you from the east coast of Canada. I live in a small fishing village. Sue is in Pittsburgh. And yet both of us are focused on teaching out of California, and then some of our research spans North America, including California as well. So we meet people from all over in our courses. I want to spend a few minutes opening the presentation with an overview of what we're going to talk about today and how we came to this session. And then Sue will spend the second half of the webinar and the afternoon, I don't know if it's morning for some of you, delving into some more practical tips and techniques around leadership. And we hope to leave about 20 minutes near the end of the session for questions, so you can type those in or put your hand up, however we'll handle questions in that open period at the end. So first, a bit of background about how we came to this seminar today. Sue and I co-chair an advisory committee at the San Jose State University School of Information, which is where we both work. We have advisory committees on a variety of topics, and because of the research and the teaching that Sue and I do, we co-chair the Leadership and Management PAC Advisory Committee. And so a few times a year we get advice and discussion and tips and suggestions from each of these PACs. And our PAC, a perennial theme, has told us that with regard to students graduating from an MLIS program and coming into the field, one of the things they notice is either a surprise or an actual lack of expectation around the fact that new grads and new librarians will be engaging in management activities much earlier in their career than they expect. So even first job interviews up through to for positions that have manager in the title, there's an expectation that new grads and librarians with many years of experience or not will have leadership and management skills. So that's sort of an ongoing theme that we're hearing, that you can never emphasize this enough for people within the profession, as well as this people new to the profession and their expectations. So over the past couple of years, one of the things that our advisory committee has discussed and suggested is developing a less formal set of webinars or other venues to talk about leadership and the qualities that make a good leader, the practices and all of those soft ways of thinking about leadership and management that might not be covered in the formal curriculum in an MLIS program like at San Jose State. And so out of that suggestion, this idea for a series of a day in the life of a leader was born. We have decided as a committee that we'll continue this on an annual basis, but it's grown to a much larger set of offerings. So one of the things that Sue put in the chat bar earlier was some of the foundational courses that our students look at or that are available to them who are interested in leadership and management at San Jose State. And I see that she has reposted that link in there. The other thing that you'll find available on our website is a recording to the Day in the Life of a Leader series that was developed earlier this spring. And as those webinars grow over time, those links will be freely available on there for you too. So one of the things I would like to do is talk a bit about the kinds of leaders that we felt would best showcase both our grads and our advisory committee and other leaders in the field, and some of the commonalities that they spoke about. We ended up with 5 speakers in our spring series, and many of the things they said were true across the board. So I'm going to take a number of those themes and highlight those for you today before Sue goes on to some more practical tips. I thought it was important to talk a bit about the speakers. As I said, the people that we felt were good examples of leaders within the community. The first two speakers were Dana Van Zanten and Heather Robinson. Dana is the manager of advocacy and community development for the St. Thomas Public Library in Ontario, Canada. She's a very recent graduate of the iSchool program. She has a lot of experience in public libraries, but is a brand new MLIS, and she certainly has been enjoying a lot of success in her role at the library. She asked her CEO, Heather Robinson, to co-present with her. She has worked at the St. Thomas Public Library for 20 years in a variety of different roles before she became CEO. Following that presentation, we invited Dr. Tracy Elliott to speak with on the webinar series. She was named the Dean of the Martin Luther King Library at San Jose State University about 2 years ago. Prior to that, she was the Director of Libraries at the State College of Florida. And then our other two speakers are also both members of our advisory committee. They're very, they give us a lot of time, and they're such great leaders in the community. We really wanted to ask them and hope that they would agree to the series. So some of the work that I am going to draw on today directly comes from those two committee members as well. So the first is Dr. Melissa Fraser Arnott. She has experience in a variety of library and different information environments. She's currently the Chief of Integrated Library Services at the Library of Parliament in Ottawa, Canada. She is a team of 14 embedded librarians who provide in-depth reference services to parliamentarians. And then Kelvin Watson was our final speaker, and he was named the Director of the Broward County Libraries in February 2017. Prior to that, he was the Chief Operating Officer and Senior Vice President for Queens Library in New York City. So you can see that we were able to draw on this wealth of experience. And again, today I'm going to talk about some of the commonalities in their presentations using slides that, points from the slides, particularly that Melissa and Kelvin shared with us, because they had such a succinct way of expressing these ideas that all five speakers of our speakers shared. Okay, so first I want to talk a bit about responsibilities as our speakers expressed them. Melissa particularly talked about in terms of developing your leadership style, that no two people really will approach this in the same way, that there are theoretical constructs and different techniques that are standard and perhaps that everyone learns across the board, but developing your own style will happen over time. And that your views are often grounded in your own experiences and knowledge. And she even expressed a lot of you know, the idea of seeing mentors and models across a lifetime. She also talked about a more granular view of leadership responsibilities. And from a functional standpoint, she noted there are really some day-to-day activities that come up over and over again in her job. So in a usual day, she said that getting people what they need to do their jobs can take up a lot of time. I just am noting there's a few issues with the slide. Should I be pausing just for a bit? I'm on slide 4, and I see not everyone is able to see the same slide. And if we can just go back to slide 4 called responsibilities. Perfect. Thank you. I hope everyone can see that. Looks good. Okay, great. So I'll probably just avoid advancing the slides on my own from here on in and just ask for Lisa if you can do that for me. So we're still on slide 4, and we're still talking about these responsibilities and functional activities within the management workplace. So in terms of a typical day, getting people the resources they need to get their jobs done really takes up quite a lot of time. And this, again, was expressed by all of our speakers. So some of the examples that were given about, what does that look like in terms of supporting your staff and making sure they can fulfill their duties. It might mean making sure that you have a full staff. So are you looking for people to fill positions? Are you writing job descriptions? Are you working with HR to do some hiring? Does everyone have the physical equipment that they need? Do they have the procedures and policies to support the work that they need to get done? And again, I notice many of you are in public libraries, so of course we all know developing procedures is important, but also having policy changed can be a bit more time consuming when you're working with your board of trustees as well too. So all of those activities sort of make up the day-to-day hours in a day. Melissa went on to talk about how building relationships can be one of the most important day-to-day activities of a leader. Some of the examples again might be relationships with your staff, relationship with other managers, peer managers, some functional specialists within your organization, again, whether that's HR or IT or any of those other departments that help support your information organization. And then your stakeholders, of course. So again, within the public library context, that's often city managers, city CAO, council members, university, it might be your provost or other department heads. Finally, she talked about as a functional responsibility, this idea of advocating for your team while you're supporting the organization and how there's a balancing act to be had. So, your greater organization, again, in the public library, that's probably your city. In the university, the larger organization is the university itself rather than the library. And in a special library, often you're a department within a company or a nonprofit. And so while you're advocating for your team as a leader to get the tools they need to do the work that they need to do, there's a balancing act about taking on more for your organization and stretching your team to the point where you think that they will be able to advance the goals of that organization. So the balancing act there is knowing what your team is capable of, but also where you can stretch the team to meet organizational goals. So figuring out the best way to assign the tasks so you can accomplish your objectives is a skill that you develop over time in terms of this day-to-day activity and that overview of being a good leader. Finally, she talked about making sure that those objectives that you're undertaking are really aligned with the overall objectives and goals of your greater organization. I think that's something that we need to keep in mind on a day-to-day basis as leaders. So in terms of the competencies needed to carry out responsibilities, the first thing that the sort of base level is this functional knowledge. So this is the kind of stuff that we learn in library school. This is theoretical knowledge, how to manage a budget, how to manage your time, write a job description, etc. Second is contextual knowledge. This is, it depends on your organization, of course. So it's things like knowing who to contact so that your budget will get passed in the library. If that's in the public library, having those contacts at City Hall so that you can work through that process over the years so that you have a successful budget when that comes time to be approved. Training people you work with so that people in your organization also have this organizational awareness about who to contact, what timing will work within your organization, all those things that help you fit as a functional department within your organization. And then the third knowledge is knowing yourself. So again, kind of coming full circle, knowing strengths and weaknesses, owning your own characteristics, where you can grow and where you might need help. So that can impact your own job satisfaction and the satisfaction of the staff. I'll move on to slide 5, please, and we'll talk a bit more about developing workplace culture. Again, this was a theme that certainly spanned all 5 of our speakers, but Kelvin really had some very succinct points about this. And he really focused on how 21st century libraries are about people. So he reflected, this is a really great line that stuck out for me in his talk, that he reflected on the American Library Association's initiative that talked about how libraries transform. and how he takes it very seriously and extends it to this idea of transforming the internal culture of the workplace. This also stuck with me in his talk. He said he's heard many times, and I'm sure you have as well, that people in libraries will often say, that's the way we've always done it. And so the theme around his talk tended to be that we needed to find ways to break out of old patterns so that we can both create organizations that transform people's lives, but also transform our internal culture so that we can create those spaces. One of the best suggestions he had was getting outside the library, getting out of your own way in terms of stopping your success and looking at things differently. He suggested that a workplace culture is leader-led and that leaders can't be afraid of breaking out of old patterns and ways of doing things just as much as the staff. So here was a great example he gave us of what's going on in Broward County. They work really closely with the transportation department in the city, and they realized that their free music streaming service that they provide would be a good fit for them in terms of commuters. So not only did they start advertising on buses, they developed a way that people could get a card on the fly and start using that service right away without even coming into the library. So imagine if you're commuting on the bus and saw this service available and could just start using it. So it's really a whole new way of looking at things from a very customer-focused point of view. If we can move to the next slide on workplace innovation, please. Great, thank you. One of the things that they have developed in Broward County, and I think this is common across many large public libraries. I think there are examples of smaller ones too, but certainly we're seeing this more and more in large libraries, is this notion of using the agile methodology that has been borrowed from the software development industry. So in terms the agile strategy, for those of you that aren't familiar with this or don't have experience in the software industry, an agile lean strategy involves interviewing and surveying customers, working in cross-disciplinary teams, focusing on follow-up with teams, engaging in a robust training schedule to get everyone on the same page, and using show and tell and looking for service models in the outside world. So it's this idea of finding what people want, implementing those changes, testing it out, using meaningful evaluation to see how that works, and then moving through that cycle over and over again. This reinforces his point about in 21st century libraries, we're really customer focused and we're resolving issues for customers rather than in the ways that we think might be best for them. Let's get out and talk to people directly and find out what their needs and frustrations are. One of the things that Kelvin mentioned, which was really great, and I challenge you to sort of think about this, when you're thinking about customers, think about their experiences and the people who are also serving them. So this is a customer-focused strategy. Think about your competitors. In this case, what are Amazon and Netflix doing that we're not doing? Why are they doing it better, faster, cheaper? Why can't we do it better too? So really stretch in terms of the competitors and the ways that we think about looking at new models outside the library. And in identifying those blockers to our own success. One of the key messages that came through from all of our speakers is don't be paralyzed by change. It's okay to fail. It's okay to evolve experiments, change them or shift your goals as you move along. Your work is never done in terms of evaluating and moving forward and transforming your goals and services to meet those needs. Kelvin went on in his talk to talk about the anatomy of transformation and the specific steps that you can take to enable transformation in your organization. So again, I started my talk by letting you know this is a whole series and it's freely available on the San Jose iSchool website. So I invite you to go check out the full version of his webinar and the other 3 webinars that we have posted there to find out more about those details. I'm watching the clock, and at this point I would like to pass the mic over to Sue and go from there. Take it away, Sue.
Thank you, Cheryl. I can handle the slides here. Whoops. Where are they all going? Well, maybe someone on the staff can move back to.
Yeah, we're on
Few more.
slide 7, effective communication.
Yeah. Keep going back. Well, while they're figuring it out, let me tell you a little bit about myself and what I'm going to be talking about today. What I've just put in the chat is a link to a study that's been done at San Jose for the last 3 years on MLIS skills at work. And it's a report that is done to see what are the most needed skills by librarians for the workforce, and also looking at what jobs are out there, how they're changing in their titles, in their specifications. And as with the 2016 and the 2017 reports, the 2018 report also found that the most in-demand skill set across all jobs was communication and interpersonal skills. Now, I have taught for a number of years, as Kim mentioned, at the University of Michigan, the University of Pittsburgh, and now at San Jose State, in courses in management and leadership. And those are generalized courses. Then I've taught specialized courses in interpersonal communication and marketing. And if you look at the link that I posted earlier to our career pathways at San Jose, there's a pathway for leadership and management. And there are some foundation courses that are highly recommended for those students who aspire to leadership positions. So there's a lot of different seminars in library management that focus on financial management, grant writing, human resources management, change management, project management, advocacy, and marketing. The other 2 courses that are considered to be foundation are marketing and public relations and interpersonal communication skills. So it's natural that these are my areas of interest, and that's what I want to talk about today. Now, before this webinar got started, many of you posted your job titles in the chat, and you are in assistant directors, branch managers, managers of departments. But I would like to say that all information professionals, all librarians are in leadership roles, whether we are leading ourselves or other people within the organization and outside the organization. So it's been very interesting in 3 different links that I'm sharing with you that communication. I'm getting ready to put another one in the chat for you. This one is from Library Journal. That leadership skills, the must-have are communication skills with people. And this last link that I put in from Library Journal was done in 2016, and it lists the top skills for leaders. And one of them, number 8, is leadership. But what I found really interesting about what they noted for a leadership skill, and I'm going to quote from this article. It said, future leaders should know their Myers-Briggs profile and have a good understanding of their personal preferences and work style. They should be aware of other personality styles and how to flex to another style and know how to develop their own development plan. Well, that's a mouthful, but I teach people to understand what your personality preferences are. How do you prefer to communicate with others? How do you prefer to receive communication? And in the Library Journal study, it was informal, talking to library leaders, but that they think that personality type and communication are most important. If you could advance to the next slide, please. So just to reiterate, communication is always on the list of must-have skills for leaders and new hires. So those of you who are currently in managerial roles and hiring, you should be on the lookout for people who have those soft skills. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about what is important in those communication factors, the different communication types and the impact factors that are most important in leadership skills. Next slide, please. So again, here's a reference to the Library Journal article and study. And communication characteristics known as these soft skills are highly desired by hiring managers, and they're the must-have for leaders. So these soft skills, and this may not be new to you, but effective speaking and writing, both internally in the organization and externally, being an active listener so that you are listening to everyone around you and really hearing what they have to say without judgment, understanding nonverbal clues. That is a whole study in and of itself. And the ability to work independently and within groups. So a leader needs to be on his or her own and then also be effective within different types of groups. Next slide, please. So communication, this is the most basic definition, and then I have a slide that will give an example of it. Communication occurs when an individual, and it can be you, sends or delivers a message to someone else or other people. And you would employ a variety of oral, written, and nonverbal techniques. So just take a minute to think about, we talk about communication, but it's any time that you send a message, whether it's intentional or unintentional to someone, that they can have it in a positive light or maybe not so positive. So we'll go to the next slide. This is a graphic on what that looks like, and I'm going to come back to this diagram with a different explanation in a few minutes. But there you are the sender, and you encode the message that you want to give to someone else. So you can encode it in words that are verbal. You can do it in written language. It could be email. It could be a formal memo. It could be over the telephone. It could be over the computer. Think of all the different ways, and you've got to get what you're intending to give to that other person, information, the message. And so take a look at that channel right there. We're going to come back to what happens between the time that you encode the message and it gets decoded by the other person or the other individuals that you're talking to. So there's a link here that you can go to this basic communication model to see it again. And as a leader, you need to make sure that your communication is effective, and not one type of communication works in all situations. So as a leader, you've got to determine what type of communication you're going to be sending out, whether it's going to be in person, face-to-face, and all those other ways that I mentioned, whether it would be verbal, nonverbal. So we'll come back to this again. Next slide. Okay, two-way communication is the most effective. The receiver, the person that you're sending your message to, should be able to respond to what you say to make certain that they understand what you intended and that they have that confirmation. In many instances, there's no opportunity for the receiver to ask for clarification. And as a leader, you don't want to have misinformation out there. So you must ensure that there is two-way communication at all times. One-way communication, the only time that it's effective is when there needs to be immediate action and instructions need to be followed clearly. But that is not the norm. So you want to be able to make sure that people who are on your staff, who you intend to lead, have the opportunity to communicate with you in order to make sure that all the information is clear. Next slide, please. Now, of course, we know that information professionals, librarians, need strong oral and written skills to interact effectively for public services positions, preparing documents both internally and externally, and these documents can be promotional materials, they can be annual reports, they can be strategic plans. All of these are forms of communication, and they need to be effective in order for you to move your organization ahead and to have make the most of it with people in the organization above you or that you're a part of. So we'll move on. I want to make sure that we have time for questions. So the next slide. This, I'm not sure how large your screen is, but this slide just shows the types of communication that there are if you have interpersonal communication, if you have internal organizational communication, and external organizational communication. So just look at all the different types of verbal. There's person to person, there's phone, there's meetings, there are presentations. Written can be email, can be memos, newsletters, print materials, electronic materials. Your website is a big form of communication, and social media. And there are preferred ways to handle your external communication. When I teach the interpersonal communications class and the marketing class, we go into specific details on the ways to effectively communicate. Just this week and next week in the marketing class that I'm teaching this term, we're focusing on print materials and electronic materials. And you need to have thought into both of these medium as effective communication. You can't just put together the print materials and hand them out. You need to be thoughtful and part of your marketing plan. Next slide. So this is one of my own quotes. Being an effective communicator entails an understanding of the factors that impact communication and possessing the strategies to deal effectively in many situations. So an effective leader can substitute leader for communicator so that you are aware of how the impact of the communication and possess the strategies to deal with it. Next slide. Now, there are many, many impact factors that affect whether communication is effective or not. Personality type, which is one major factor that I won't go into in any detail in the time that we have, but as was noted in the Library Journal article, I happen to use the Myers-Briggs personality type inventory so that people understand what their preferences are and that not everyone shares those same preferences. So as a leader, you need to be able to communicate with people who have all different types of communication styles. There are many cultural differences that you need to be aware of through language, customs, and culture does not have to be from another country. It can be from someone in your neighborhood based on their interests that they have, their gender, their age, many, many different cultural factors that impact communication. Nonverbal factors and written. Now I'm going to talk a few minutes about noise. If you can think back to the slide a few slides ago where you are encoding the message that you want to give so that you're saying something to another person and it ought to be very straightforward, but they may not get exactly what you mean. There can be miscommunication, and that's because of the noise. It could be physical noise. There could be noise in the background from someone else talking, music. It could be a drop call. Some of you have had audio issues on the webinar today. That's noise where you've missed some things. Physiological noise. People could be distracted and not hear what you're saying or what you're communicating. If they're too hot, if their head hurts, if they're hungry, if they're fatigued, if they're angry. Psychological, you can have people who are anxious, who are daydreaming, who are worrying. So you have to try to understand what the other person is experiencing and hope that all the factors are in alignment so that the communication is clear. And then semantic, there's ambiguity in words or meanings. You can have the same word, but it may mean different things based on your background or your understanding. Or it could be the way it is pronounced. It could be a difference in your tone or how you are communicating that. So lots of different impact factors and lots of things that get in the way through the noise. And these things can also happen in written communication because it can be the grammar, it can be the punctuation, it can be reading between the lines, or it can be reading things exactly as it's stated, but that's not what the person meant. So clarity in all cases. Next slide, please. Nonverbal clues. There are whole courses on this, but just to let you know that your communication in a face-to-face situation can be impacted by all of these. Today, it's maybe not a nonverbal clue, but it could be. I could say, I'm very happy. But you hear the tone that it's not, I'm very happy. So your intonation, whether it's face-to-face or over online, can really impact what is being communicated. Next slide. Briefly, cultural differences can impact communication. And so if you do have people who are new to the culture where you are living, and it doesn't even have to be someone from outside the country, people can say yes, but they don't always mean yes. You can be telling a new employee how to do something and you'll say, do you understand? And they'll say yes. Maybe they do understand at that exact moment, but after you leave, they forget and they really don't understand. Or sometimes they say yes just to save face. So we can have a lot to talk about cultural differences. Next slide. Generations. Right now there are 5 different generations in the workforce. So you can't make generalizations, blanket generalizations about communication styles between each generation, but there are some commonalities. So someone who's born before 1946 might have differences in communication styles with a millennial or a Gen X. And there's lots of readings that you can find about the generational differences. And I am just looking at chat real quickly. I might have missed some things, but a good nonverbal communication training. Yes, I can recommend some. I can recommend some books as well, but give me a minute and we'll come back to that. So generational differences can make a really big impact on communication. Next slide. So some of the other soft skills desired by managers and for leaders, and Cheryl had alluded to some of these in her remarks. You need to be able to build strong relationships with the people whom you are leading and outside of your organization. And one of the ways to build strong relationships is through effective communication. Effectively managing conflict, again, a communication skill. We're having lots of changes in the 21st century library. I teach a course in the emerging future, technology issues and trends. And as Cheryl said, you're going to find many people in all types of organizations that are resistant to change. So communication comes into play as you're trying to move an organization forward. Problem solving also entails effective communication. Next slide. And I just had some students at San Jose send me email and said they were writing an article for the student blog on how to become a leader or to get leadership skills if you don't have any experience. So I've just written to them, and we'll share some of these things with you. That you need to take professional development workshops. What we're giving today is an overview, but perhaps you can take some that are much more focused on specifics for different skills. Joining professional associations, whether they're on the local level, regional, or the state level, and joining a committee. Leading a committee, lots of times they have virtual committees, and taking that leadership role that is offered to you. Reading publications so that you know what managers and leaders are thinking, and not just library publications. I think the Harvard Business Review is a must read for anyone who is interested in leadership. It doesn't matter that it's not focused on libraries, but it's focused on leadership. Making presentations. Doing a poster session, working with a group of colleagues to present something at a conference that you are working on. I'll put in a plug for the Library 2.0 online conference that we have at San Jose State University. Some of you may have attended it before. Our next one coming up in a couple weeks is on social crisis management. There's so many social crises that we do have a course now on how to deal with library users as well as some staff members who may have an overdose, that you've got homeless, that you've got people who are abused coming into the library, and it's a whole new set of leadership skills that haven't been discussed until the last couple of years. Anyway, my point that I was going to make is that if you have any experience in this, you can do an online presentation at the Library 2.0 conference. So if you just go to our San Jose State website and key in Library 2.018, it's still plenty of time to make a proposal to do a half-an-hour presentation. If you are doing something in your library dealing with the opioid crisis or homelessness or any social crisis, and run for an office in one of the associations, or lead a committee within your own organization. One of my former students wanted to be involved in marketing the library, and so she went to the director and she said, could I lead a committee? They didn't have one on marketing, and the director said, yes, go ahead. So this new professional, started a marketing and public relations committee. They worked really hard, and it was an academic library, and within a year they won the ACRL award for the best marketing plan in the country, in the association. So you can do it on local levels. Next slide. And network. You absolutely have to use your communication skills to network in a professional mentoring program. ALA has one. State associations often have them. I said join professional associations, attend the meetings and conferences, talk with members of your community to make connections. And it doesn't just have to be in a library, but go to different organizations that interest you and offer to do a presentation on what's going on at the library. And then join social media groups. I have to make a plug for the LinkedIn LIS career options. Kim Doherty, some of you may know, but she has a fabulous site with lots of information about how to be a library leader. So I will leave you with that. I think there may be one more slide, but nope, it's questions for us. So please, Kim, if we've missed anything, please let us know.
Nope. The only question that came in so far was from Sarah Moore, who asked about
the nonverbal.
Good nonverbal communication training.
And I need to think about that a minute. I was thinking she was taught nonverbal communication training. Cheryl, if you want to talk a minute, I think I've got something. I just need to look it up real quickly.
Sounds great, Sue. I'm just thinking about, I'm often blown away by the number of offerings through things like WebJunction, and indeed it sounds like this, here in Indiana there are often topics. I know in Canada we have a national organization that offers topics throughout the year, and nonverbal communication, while it tends not to come up regularly, every couple of months, it's usually something that's offered. I see it at least once a year, and that's through both paid and free seminars. And then there's some really basic, great texts out there. There's one I'm thinking of. I know Sue's being more diligent looking this up, but I'm thinking of a book, I think it was published by Libraries Unlimited, and I believe one of the authors was Patricia Dudney-Ross, around communication in the library. And there was a co-author, and the name is escaping me right now, but very clear, great book around communication.
Excuse me, that's the book I use in my interpersonal communications course.
There you go.
And it's right here.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
It's right here on the floor. It's Communicating Professionally. It's Catherine Sheldrick Ross and Kirsty Nielsen. Highly recommend.
Perfect, that's it. Yeah, I do too.
I'll type that in. I didn't mean to interrupt, Cheryl.
No, I'm glad you had the actual title and authors there, since I was mixing them together. I think the author I was thinking was the first edition, and it's I think there's a third edition now. I
use the third edition, yes, and it's a must-have book. I highly recommend it. The students that have been in my class say that they pick it up for everything. It talks about every kind of communication you could think of. And there's a section in here on nonverbals. So I hope you saw that I put the Center for Nonverbal Communication in the chat. Any other questions?
Looks like you're getting a lot of thank yous. I do just want to take a moment to remind you all of the link that's in the chat box for the survey. Please fill that out. Let us know what you think about today's survey. And also, we do have an LEU free guides who need them, those in Indiana. please make sure that you download and get your LEU. You just click on it, upload the file, print your name, and go ahead
I
and
don't know if
print
you,
that out.
I'm sorry, I don't know if you saw the
But we'll
question.
still,
If they,
I'm
is
sorry.
there a way for them to go back and get the slides?
We have a copy. What we'll do is, if it's okay with Cheryl and Sue, we'll go ahead and send out the slides. Would that be okay when we
Works for
send out the
me.
recording?
Sure.
Is that okay with you, Cheryl?
Okay.
Yep.
So hopefully that works for
Well,
everyone.
thank you so much for inviting us. I hope that it was informative for people. Oh, and I did want to say one more thing if people are still here. At San Jose State University, we have an open university. So if there is room in our courses, you do not have to enroll as a student. You do need to apply, but you can take any of our courses, whether they're leadership or communication, and we have a number of professionals who take our Open University courses each term. So if you're interested in that, just look at the SJSU iSchool website and Open University. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having us, Kim. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I will be here for about a few more minutes, so if anybody has any questions for me, I'll be here. If you don't mind sticking around just for a couple seconds here and see in case anybody has any questions. Looks like somebody raised their hand. Let's see.